It is Thursday, October 28th, 2021, 48 hours away, give or take by a few minutes from kickoff between Michigan and Michigan State on the gridiron at Spartan Stadium in East Lansing. I'm Aaron McMahon, Michigan football beat writer from Live.com. I am joined by Matt Wenzel, Michigan State football beat writer. Big weekend, obviously. It seems like this week, I don't know about for you, Matt, but for me, it seems like this week is kind of dragged on. I'm sure the fan base would agree, given everything that is on up for grabs this weekend. Big weekend for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, you kind of about then you started to see this potential. Both teams off to surprising starts, given how last year went, obviously, and it was just a matter of the unthinkable, which was them both being 7-0 at the last weekend of October, and that's exactly what we've got. So, first time since '64, both these teams are ranked in the AP top 10. I mean, this is a big game every year. Doesn't matter what the records are. And now with you got them both unbeaten, only unbeaten teams in the Big Ten. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than this as far as this game goes.
Yeah, Michigan is ranked sixth in the AP poll. Michigan State eighth. You mentioned first time they've been in the top 10 since '64. Michigan is a slight at this point, like a 4-point favorite according to the odds makers. That's kind of fluctuated a few points over the week, but it's largely remained intact. I can't think of a bigger just stage for this game. I mean, the game is going to be broadcast. Kickoff is at noon on Saturday on Fox. Obviously, they're sending their big noon kickoff pregame show that will broadcast, outside Spartan Stadium on Saturday. But not only that, but ESPN has decided to send their game day show. I think most folks thought it was going to go to Columbus for the Ohio State-Penn State game, but Penn State's 9-overtime loss to Illinois on Saturday kind of changed that. Michigan State is going to be the biggest college football game of the weekend. A lot going on. But before we get into the actual matchup, I want to kind of hit on a couple other topics. We'll start with you and the Michigan State side, but should fans expect any notable absences, any injuries? Guys, you have any updates on that side?
Yeah, well, Mel Tucker does not say basically anything about injuries. His go-to response is they're sore and he'll be ready when he's ready. So, starting defensive end Drew Beasley's been out since the Nebraska game. He suffered a apparent right leg injury. We don't know when he's going to be back. Elijah Collins, a running back, backup running back behind Kenneth Walker. He's only played one offensive series. He looked good, and then he got a leg injury too. We don't know when he's going to be back. Jalen Hunt, a key defensive tackle, has been banged up basically all year. He's missed the last couple of games. They got some other backup defensive ends. But those are guys that have been out for weeks. So beyond that, I don't know. We'll see. But they did have the bye week to get some guys rested up and healed up. And Mel said they were working on getting guys back, but wouldn't be specific on if he anticipated guys who had been out recently to actually play on Saturday.
It's
about the Michigan side.
Yeah, similar side on similar situation here on the Michigan side. Jim Harbaugh typically doesn't disclose injuries unless they're long-term in nature. Michigan did play without two starting offensive linemen last week against Northwestern. Zach Zinter, Trevor Keegan, both were held out. It seemed like for precautionary reasons. Zinter had a lower body injury a few weeks back at Nebraska. It didn't seem like it was serious at the time because he didn't play in the second half, but he was on the sideline in uniform with his helmet. And then Trevor Keegan actually played through that Nebraska game with a shoulder injury. They held him out last week against Northwestern. I expect both of them to play. We asked Jim Harbaugh about it. He just basically said, we'll see, which is what he typically does. Another injured Michigan player, he did in fact play last week, Roman Wilson, receiver. He's been dealing with a wrist injury. He's got a cast on it. I expect him to play even though he's going through that. So by and large, Michigan's a relatively healthy bunch, all things considered. They did lose their starting one of their top receiver, Ronnie Bell, week one due to injury. He obviously won't play on Saturday, but by and large, Michigan is a relatively healthy bunch considering they're 7 games into this season. But let's go through the week. What was your impressions from player interviews, just in terms of their feelings going into this game and just how they're approaching Saturday?
I mean, the theme was eliminate the distractions and tune out the noise. I mean, obviously, Mel's done a good job. He knows a few weeks back, maybe a month, whatever it was, where he talked about where Michigan State is clearly a big surprise team in the nation. Kenneth Walker is a Heisman candidate. He said he started the week by having graphics put up on the screen right in front of the team just to tell them basically, hey, this is happening. We're not trying to hide from anything. But at the same time, anytime you got the rivalry game and with the rankings and everything's at stake, they're trying to tune out any of the noise and keep it focused about the expression. Our voices will be the ones in our building. Those voices will be the loudest ones and the ones we hear. So, I mean, nobody was saying anything, and I didn't expect anybody to throw any trash talk out there. It's respect. They're a good team. Yeah, we don't like each other, but everybody knows the deal. So let's just settle it Saturday. Was it pretty much a similar tone from Michigan side?
Yeah, I would say so. Michigan's been throwing around this line all season long, nameless, faceless opponents, in regards to the team they're facing that week. It's kind of a line the new linebackers coach George Hilo kind of threw out there this year. And it's an approach they've taken, it seems like every week, but they do acknowledge this is a bigger game. I mean, it is their in-state rival. They obviously lost to the Spartans last year in Ann Arbor, a game, that they feel like they should have won, and they felt like let get away. So all things considered, with the rivalry and the bragging rights, and not only that, but everything at stake here. And Michigan is certainly treating this game. It seems like a little bit differently than they did last year. We've had a couple of players this week kind of admit they felt like they overlooked the Spartans last year. Now it's easier to say that now because they lost, and after the fact you can say whatever. But it certainly seems like they're taking this game very seriously. I know the cliche line is one game at a time, but that really has been Michigan's approach all season long. It's kind of come from the top, and Jim Harbaugh and the coaching staff, because they acknowledge they aren't good enough to overlook anyone, especially when you're trying to get to the top. Harbaugh in the offseason, he acknowledged, as has been in previous years, their goal is to win the Big Ten championship and beat Ohio State. But you can't do that unless you beat the opponent in front of you. So that's kind of how they're looking at it. Same thing, not a ton of trash talk. Aiden Hutchinson was asked about his former roommate and teammate Ben Van Sumeren, now a linebacker at Michigan State. He says he hasn't talked to him at all since he transferred from Michigan to Michigan State. But he certainly wants a win, to kind of prove that he should, that he should have transferred. But no, not a ton of trash talk. I expect a lot of that to happen on Saturday once they get on the field. But we'll see. I guess given the history of this rivalry, you don't know what you're going to get. Both of these teams are always jacked going into this game. Emotions are always high, especially early. Right after kickoff. So it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. Let's get a little bit more about each side of the ball. We'll start with Michigan State's offense. It's an interesting group, a very dynamic, versatile. Who are some of the players we should be looking out for, and where do you think Michigan State bodes well, or where do you think some of their strengths are against Michigan on the offensive side of the ball?
Oh, I mean, you're going to start with Kenneth Walker. He's the nation's leading rusher, so everybody should know his name by now. He's only 3 yards shy of 1,000. Michigan State hasn't had a 1,000-yard rusher since 2014, which is pretty telling. But he's been a difference maker. I mean, he's a legitimate Heisman candidate, and 2 200-yard games this year, 4 100-yard games. You get him in the open field, his vision, his cutting ability. I mean, he is a real difference maker. At the same time, Nebraska and Indiana both found ways to slow him down. So that'll be something to watch, obviously, if the offensive line give him a little space. But Peyton Thorne, starting quarterback, took over this year after winning the competition and coming out of fall, and he's been one of the most efficient in the nation. He's got 15 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. So he's done a really good job managing the offense, and with the playmakers he's got, and he's a threat with his legs as well. So you got to watch out for him. And then you go to the edge, Jaden Reed and Jalen Naylor are their top 2 wide receivers. They're a potent combo. They both have 27 catches, more than 500 yards, 11 combined touchdowns, and they're big play guys too. So I think everybody remembers what happened last year in the game, Michigan State attacking over the top. They have the ability to do that again this year with a quarterback who turns the ball over less, and they actually have a running game to support that offense, which they haven't had in years. So, all in all, it's a much improved offense from last year and recent years. How that matches up against what will be the best defense they've faced all season, that'll be really interesting to see. So I guess what is there Michigan's defense that you like, as far as this matchup against Michigan State, and where they have maybe some strengths?
Yeah, you mentioned, Michigan being the best defense Michigan State will face has faced so far. I think this is going to be the best offense Michigan has faced, just in terms of how they can do things in the run game and the pass game. Michigan's defense has struggled at times this year, and statistically, they're near the top of the Big Ten in rush defense, pass defense, scoring defense. They're second in the nation in scoring defense behind Georgia, which I think is a big surprise. But they've had struggles this year. I mean, they struggled to contain Rutgers, option offense earlier in the season. They had troubles with Nebraska quarterback Adrian Martinez. But if there's been one kind of characteristic of this Michigan defense so far under first year coordinator, Mike McDonald, is they've just adjusted well. They're not playing that aggressive man scheme where they're blitzing a ton all the time like they did under Don Brown. It's a little bit more versatile. They have no problem, lining up 2 and 3 guys up front. They have no problem dropping guys back in coverage and zone. They like to do different things, get Aiden Hutchinson more involved, and he's been such a star this year. I mean, I think so many of us expected him coming in to be that leader in defense, and he certainly has, not only locally but statistically. But he's been a handful for opposing offenses, and not only that, but he's helped get other guys involved. So if opposing offenses are doubling him or tripling him, it's opened up things on the other side of Michigan's defensive line. Linebacker David Ajabo has adjusted nicely. He's benefited nicely. Hutchinson has 5.5 sacks to his name this year. Ajabo has 5. So Michigan's getting production from several guys. They've got playmakers at all three levels of the defense. I mentioned Hutchinson on the defensive line. Josh Ross is a 5th-year linebacker. He's improved his speed. He's looked a lot better this year. And then the secondary, it's a group it started last year. Safety Daxon Hill, I think, is a potential NFL, first or second round pick at some point. He's a playmaker. So they've got guys at all 3 levels, and now they're kind of playing more cohesively than they have in the past. Last year was just it was an off year. That they really struggled as a group. I think part of that was schematics, and with McDonald coming in, I think it's changed a lot. They're playing more confidently. They're not getting beat over the top, as you mentioned. In years past, they're keeping the ball in front of them, and I think that's one of the reasons why they've been so successful. And if you ask me, I think it's a big reason as to why they're 7-0. This defense is, I think, miles ahead of where we expected it to be. I thought it'd be a slow start, given the new coordinator, new coaching staff, a new scheme. But the players that came back have adjusted, I think, really well for Michigan. Tell us about the Michigan State defense. It's a group that it seems like experienced. Mel Tucker plugged in a lot of guys from the transfer portal there, and they seem to be playing pretty well as well.
Yeah, I mean, the strength of the defense is the line up front. And they returned, basically everybody but Naquan Jones for the most part. So they're real deep up front. They've been rolling, heavy with the rotation since the opener, and I don't expect that to change. Excuse me. But they did overhaul at linebacker through the portal, same at cornerback. But overall, the number. I mean, last year they didn't have any. They didn't have a padded practice until less than a month before the season opener under a new staff, and the defense just didn't look. It was just out of sorts. They gave up program record 35 points a game, so they've cut that number basically in half this year. The defense has been playing much better. Where they're good against the run. The pressure's ramped up. They're top 10 in the nation sacks. I think 3.7 a game. Where it gets a little weird is the secondary. The passing yards allowed stand out a lot because they've given up a lot of yards through the air. But it's a bend but don't break approach. We've obviously heard that term before. So they've given up a ton of yards, but not the points, and that's really what matters. So teams have been successful moving the ball down the field. They get in the red zone and they forced, key field goal attempts. Those were big in the win against Western Kentucky, big in the win against Indiana 2 weeks ago. So where you look in the middle, I think there's something to watch for on Saturday. Their defensive tackles have been really good this year, particularly Jacob Slade. He's a guy, if you look at his stat line, not going to pop out, but if you watch him on the field, how disruptive he is. He's an impressive player. Jacob Panasuk, one of their DNs, is playing the best football of his career. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much their defense. I think for Michigan State, the key is going to be limit the run, which obviously Michigan, they're a run-heavy team, and make McNamara beat them with their arm. So, how do you think that translates?
You nailed it. I mean, Michigan has been run heavy all season long. They've leaned on their two running backs, Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins. All season they're both over 600 yards rushing. They both got 10 touchdowns in their name. Michigan really came into this year realizing and with a game plan of utilizing those two backs. They've got an experienced offensive line, a fifth-year senior, a sixth-year senior. They've got guys that have been around the program a while and have held up and played relatively well. And they leaned on it. And they came into the year with Cade McNamara tabbed as the starting quarterback. He's played relatively fine, but he hasn't done anything fantastic. He hasn't gone out there and won Michigan a game yet. And really, he hasn't had to. The first three games, Michigan was run heavy. They're running, 40, 50 carries per game. They didn't really have to do much else. Since Big Ten, the Big Ten schedule has started, the competition is obviously ramped up, and Michigan's had to throw the ball a little bit more, and that's where the point of contention, I think, with the Michigan fan base has come in. They aren't satisfied with the passing game, and they have a right to be. Michigan's rush offense, is first in the Big Ten, but their passing offense is near the bottom in efficiency rankings and just statistics in general. And part of the reason, I think, part of it's play calling. They haven't necessarily, accentuated the long passing game. Part of it is McNamara's lack of a strong arm. I think he's fine in the short and intermediate game, but with some of those deep balls, he's been inconsistent and just missed receivers. And then, as I mentioned earlier, they lost their top receiver, Ronnie Bell, week one. He was by and large, their most productive guy in terms of creating separation, getting those big catches. And since he's gone out, Michigan really hasn't been able to find that number two, number three receiver that can go out there and gain separation and make those big plays. They've gotten them occasionally. They have had a couple long balls, but it hasn't been consistent enough to where you start to wonder how Michigan is going to fare against a better defense like a Michigan State or a Penn State down the road. So this game is really going to be telling, I think, for Cade McNamara, the starting quarterback. He's been fine and efficient. He's only thrown one interception. He's done everything that's been asked of him, but he hasn't necessarily had to do it in a big game situation. This is going to be it. Michigan is going to certainly lean on the run game. I expect them to come out Saturday and pound the rock early and often to see how successful that is. And then after that, they're going to obviously have to turn to the passing game. So Michigan's offense has been it's been an interesting conversation all season long. The rushing game's been fantastic. They haven't had to lead on just one guy. It's been a couple of guys, but the passing game's left their, as Jim Harbaugh said, left more meat on the bone there. So, their offense is going to be interesting. I think whether Michigan can sustain long drives, because that's another thing that I think that's done well for Michigan. They're near the top in the country. I think top 10 in time of possession. Obviously a lot of that is because they run the ball so much, but they're keeping opposing offenses off the field, and that's certainly helped them as well. So, Michigan's going to have to, I think, run the ball effectively. Be accurate in the short and immediate game just to stand a chance on Saturday. Because I think, as I mentioned, this Michigan State defense is probably going to be one of the better outfits they played all year long. Before we wrap up, final thoughts on the game. Our predictions are up at mlive.com, so I don't feel like you have to give it here. If you don't want to, we can send the readers there. But just give your kind of keys to victory for Michigan State and what you're expecting on Saturday.
Offensively, they're going to need Kenneth Walker to be, productive like he has been most of the year. Not to say that Peyton Thorne is incapable of winning games. He's shown he has, and he's got the arm, he's got the talent on the outside to do that. But I really think they're going to need Walker to probably be a 100-yard type of game, probably going more. They're going to need to play a lot cleaner football than they have the last couple of weeks. It was pretty sloppy at Indiana, and just season high in penalties. Some of them just being some silly stuff and. Flip it around and I think, repeating again, they can't let Michigan just sit there and grind out the, 4 and 5 yards of carry and dominate time of possession like they have been doing most of the year. They're going to have to, like I said, make McNamara beat him with his arm, or maybe McCarthy, who knows? But, if it gets in that situation where they start airing it out, then it becomes, that what we talked about earlier, what has been the weakness of Michigan State's defense is, giving up a bunch of yards through the, cornerback, which, it's really interesting because they're basically rolling with brand new guys that were with the team until this summer at cornerback. You got Ronald Williams, who's from Alabama, Chester Kimbrough from Florida are your top two corners right now. Marquis Lowry from Louisville, he came back from injury, played the last couple of weeks. So put those guys out there, and then a name I need to mention, Xavier Henderson, the senior safety, who barely comes off the field. He will be a factor both run and pass defense. So Yeah, I mean, it's typical cliches, turnovers and rushing yards and penalties and stuff like that. But we really also be looking to see how these guys handle the environment, because it is going to be pretty crazy there on Saturday, as you would imagine. And for Michigan State, you got a lot of new guys that haven't been in this rivalry before, so see how they handle it. Because it's going to be, this is the biggest game of the week in the nation, and obviously the biggest one Michigan State's played in quite some time. So. But what do you see as far as those keys to the game from Michigan that we've kind of talked about?
Yeah, you mentioned cliches, and I really think this game is going to be won up front on the offense and defensive lines. Both teams run the ball well. Both teams have deficiencies on the defensive side of the ball. Michigan's, I think, in the secondary, they've done a decent job of masking. But yeah, I think the team that runs the ball better and, as you mentioned, doesn't turn the ball over is probably going to be the victor here. This is a very evenly matched game. It was difficult for me, at least, to come up with a prediction for this one, because I could see it going either way. We always say with the Michigan State rivalry, throw out the statistics, throw out the records. Well, if you look at the statistics and the records, it's darn near split. So, and you want to go for maybe the home team. Michigan State maybe theoretically has the advantage because it's at home, but Michigan's won the last two at Spartan Stadium. So this game is, I think, going to come down the wire. It's going to be a close one. I'm expecting one, maybe a late score to decide this one, but I'm fascinated by this game. I'm excited for it. It's been a while for both of these programs, since they've been in a big game that's mattered a ton, and that's certainly the case on Saturday. For those of you watching, make sure you check mlive.com for our predictions. They're up now, mlive.com/Wolverines, mlive.com/Spartans. And if you are going to the game or planning to be in East Lansing this weekend, note all the game day information. Parking lots of Spartan Stadium are set to open at 7 a.m. for tailgating. College game day is set to open its gates at 5:30 a.m. Their broadcast starts at 9 live on television. Fox's Big Noon Kickoff show is at Spartan Stadium Gate B at 10 a.m. Barstool Sports will be at Cedar Village at 10 a.m. I certainly would not want to be there for that one. And then gates of the stadium open at 10:30 at game time. Kickoff is shortly after noon. It's a Fox game, so it probably won't start till 12:10, 12:15. Either way, get in the stadium, root on your favorite team, and enjoy the game. I know I'm excited for it. I think Matt is. But thanks for watching. And make sure you check mlive.com/Wolverines and mlive.com/Spartans for all your Michigan and Michigan State football coverage.